Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Audit and Resources Committee. My name is Councillor Cllr Holes and I am chair of this committee and will be conducting the meeting tonight. I apologise for the microphone. This meeting will be video recorded and will be uploaded to the council's website. More information is available on the council website. Please speak clearly for everyone to be able to hear, and we will now move to the first item, which is apologies for us. One.
Yes, you've got apologies from Councillor Bear.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. It's not working. Mic's not working. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Declarations of interest. Do members have anything they wish to declare at the moment? If not, anything that comes up during the meeting, please indicate in the normal way. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. And I just wanted to raise with members the fact that we agreed at that meeting to put out tenders or applications for independent members for this committee going forward as a way of broadening our knowledge base, etc. And we had a number of applications which we will duly look at. The closing date is the 19th, which is the end of this week. And once we have made that selection, it's Councillor Tidridge and myself, we will then bring it to committee and move forward. Thank you. Are there any other matters arising out of those minutes that members wish to speak? No? Okay, I will ask for a proposer and seconder. Proposed Councillor Bourne, seconded Councillor Park. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's duly carried. Thank you very much. The mic is not working. Just wave if you can't hear me, please. Item 4 is public participation. We have a member of the public that's indicated they wish to speak tonight, but I've asked him if it would be okay for him to raise his questions, which we have answers for, during items 8 and 9 rather than in the public section, and he's happy to do that, and I will be allowing him extra minutes to be able to ask those questions. Nobody else wishes to speak. Moving on to item 5, which is the redeployable trail cameras for investigating fly tipping. And I asked Harry Lee to introduce that item, and Harry, you're on Teams, I believe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Holes. Yeah, that's right. So we've had a corporate policy and procedure for the use of redeployable trail cameras for the investigation of fly tipping. This is looking to provide officers with another investigative tool to help with their investigation and enforcement of fly tipping, to try and improve the Borough Council's record of enforcement against fly tipping. This is another tool, I think, in the armoury in the investigation and enforcement process for them. It's quite a lengthy document, as I'm sure you all appreciate, and that's because the rules around surveillance, the Human Rights Act and data protection are obviously, and compliance with that legislation is obviously very important as a local authority. So we've got quite a comprehensive policy which details all of the relevant legislation and policy which we must adhere to, and then the process that we endeavour to follow to enable the deployment of these cameras and be compliant with all of that legislation. Within the many appendices within there, is in a similar process, we brought a body body-worn video camera policy to Audit and Resources and Cabinet last year. It looks to follow a very similar format, so we've got a consistency in approach for as we did for that, and similarly as the advice that came from Audit and Resources for that one, there is a staff user guide as well in that, which is a procedure document for staff to make a kind of a more digestible content for them, that if they follow that procedure that they will be compliant with the relative legislation, acknowledging that I suppose the length and complexity of the policy document itself. So yeah, open the floor to if there's any particular questions with regards to the policy or any of its associated appendices, then happy to answer them as best I can, or defer to any legal colleagues in the room if I can't.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any questions from the floor? No? Okay, thank you. Open to members. Questions? Councillor Irish.
Do we know where it's going to be installed? Because I've got a particularly bad one in Chandler's Ford that really needs to be, it's constantly being cited and legal close, and I wonder whether we know where the further locations are.
Harry, did you hear that?
Was the question with regard to do we know where the hotspot locations?
Where and how will they be the locations be chosen for installation?
Sure. So we've as part of the sort of background fly tipping work, we've fly tipping cases that are reported on the Salesforce system. So we obviously have anecdotal knowledge from the local response officers, direct services, and sort of town and parish councils in terms of sites that they regularly visit to clean up fly tips. But we also, any Salesforce case that is generated which tells the council about a fly tip, we've set up a system so that automatically gets populated onto the GIS mapping system with a whole range of filters, which allows those officers to look at that mapping by scale of tip, and obviously over certain time periods, type of tip, etc., so that we can identify clusters or hotspots where we're getting regular offences, so that we can use those as the targeted hotspots, areas that we would then look to install signage once we've got the policy in place and deploy cameras.
Okay.
Yes, I'm constantly reporting even closer. So okay, I'll carry on doing that. When I'm a hotspot, it'll be, that's where the cameras go then.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that we work for our LACs in order to ensure that the areas that we know of within our own LACs are actually put on the list. And I'm sure Harry will be happy to receive those. And that way it goes through the LAC, which is in a way better than getting lots of councillors putting in their own requests. I think that makes sense, Harry. Yeah. I think so. I think members will often receive complaints from the public and probably be quite well informed around where kind of persistent problem areas are. So that feedback to the teams that deal with investigation and enforcement would obviously be really welcomed. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from members? Councillor Bourne.
So read through the policy and the procedures and everything is it's really good detail. Once we've identified people, have we then got the resources in place to take the legal action, to go to court and to follow this all through? Because all this is set up, but then the next stages will need extra officer time to do that, which we may not have had up to date.
Yeah, so there's certainly been in terms of getting cases through to go up to the legal services team to prosecution has been a struggle. That we've actually got a process in place at the moment, which we updated management liaison recently to allocate more time to a dedicated member of staff to try and focus on progressing with some of the investigations and enforcement action. So we are hopeful, obviously, that with this trying to be prioritised, that we've got that allocated individual staff resource to take some of these forward. I think as with anything with staff capacity, and depending on the number of opportunities which come forward during busy times, they will need to look to prioritise and triage those cases as those that are in the sort of highest public interest, and where prosecution is proportionate, based on the time, and where we potentially have the highest chance of success to ensure that the officer time that we do have available is best spent.
Yeah, because enforcement is key. Once people see that it's being enforced, it will then hopefully dissuade other people from actually getting caught in the first place.
And I think once we've secured a few enforcements, then ensuring that our comms around that, obviously depending on the nature of it and what can be disclosed, but certainly comms around successful enforcement will help spread the word, and hopefully that will be as important as the enforcement ourselves, is spreading the word about us, about successful enforcement as a deterrent to future fly tippers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Attrill.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting anything.
Councillor Attrill asked,
Sorry, apologies.
Do you know how many prosecutions we've carried forward in the last year?
We haven't carried any prosecutions forward in the last year yet.
So this will allow us to do that.
It's another, yeah, absolutely. It's another tool that hopefully will enable that, plus some changes to processes to try and push those forward. So there's a number of cases pending at the moment which are being progressed. I know that a number of cases we've had interviews under caution, which have taken place recently with cases which are under investigation. So I think we're hopeful that some of those will lead to successful enforcement action.
Thank you for that, Barry. Just one observation myself. As councillors, we're all aware of areas within our wards that cause this problem or have this problem, and residents are always asking what can be done about it. Can you put cameras up, etc.? But we have to realise how expensive this is to deal with fly tipping. Every time there's a case where our staff have to go out and clear it up, it costs money, and it's taxpayers' money. So I think this scheme is definitely worth pursuing, because if we can reduce the amount of money we spend on clearing up fly tipping, the all the better, and it will make people feel a lot happier about the environment they live in. And it might put off the transgressors if there is a threat of court proceedings or fines, etc. You do occasionally see videos from other parts of the country where they've got TV, and it's quite amazing what some people will do. Councillor Pretty.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think it's very important that we carry this forward as quickly and as positively as we can. The County Council currently proposing closure of waste recycling centres all over the county, particularly in this area. I can see a situation where we suddenly see a proliferation of fly tipping in the area, and I think if Harry and the team can deploy these cameras and follow it through with legal action, I think will be a very worthwhile endeavour. I think we had a case in Hedge End, West End and Botley years ago. We had massive fly tipping up by Canes Hill. I don't believe that ever was followed through. Our direct services team cleared the rubbish and just left it. I think if we're going to do it, we must make sure that there are sufficient resources within the organisation to follow it through and make sure prosecutions are carried to the very end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pretty. Just one other question, Harry. Going forward, once this is established and in place, how is it going to be monitored, and who are the results of that monitoring going to be reported to? Will it be policy and performance scrutiny?
Do you mean in terms of compliance with the policy or the success?
There's a lot of
procedure.
lot of laws and regulations, and we want to ensure that we're keeping within the law and abiding by those regulations. And we also need to see the performance year on year and see how it's working. So I'm assuming that it would go before scrutiny at some point, and I would guess it would be policy and performance. So that needs to be noted, that it needs to go on their work programme once it's had a chance to establish and is in operation.
Okay, yeah, I think in the policy at the moment it talks about the review of the policy and the procedure and the systems for that, with the staff in sort of responsible for the procedure. So head of regulatory services, executive head for planning and environment, and with the head of legal services. And then if there are amendments or significant material changes to it, for then to come back to A&R committee. If we need to establish kind of more regular procedural reviews with performance, then I can ensure that that's kind of integrated into the policy. I'm just trying to, on a small screen, look who's in the room. Maybe I'll pick that up with sort of Joe and Nikki just to check in terms of the regular checking that we need to do on that front. In terms of its performance, this is tied in with the head of regulatory services, who has met with Lewis Gould I'm sorry, I'm forgetting Lewis's title, but in terms of looking at the council's corporate KPIs and also the service performance indicators to ensure that we are reporting on the success of, obviously we report on our fly tipping numbers anyway, but our enforcement action that is being taken more collectively through different forms, obviously FPNs, caution letters and prosecution. So that has already been picked up to ensure that it's reported through corporately.
Yes, I've had a whisper from the side that it would be policy and performance that would look into any future reviews and put it before themselves to analyse and comment.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
I will pick that up and just ensure that we make that amendment clear in the policy, and that it's I'm not hugely familiar with that process, but I'm sure I'll pick that up with Joe and Nikki to ensure that we get that right.
No, I mean, we're talking ongoing. We're not talking about, within the next few months. It's got to operate first before this. Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, I have a proposer and seconder if there's no further questions. Proposed Councillor Bourne, seconded Councillor Park. All in favour of noting the report, with those noting those comments, and any against and any abstentions. Okay, that's duly carried. Item 6 is a regulation of investigatory powers, and I'll ask Joe this afternoon. It's the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is our annual report, just really informing the committee that we haven't had to use the powers this year. So it's as simple as that. If there's any questions, we're happy to take it, but otherwise I just ask for that report to be noted.
Very much.
Has there been any requests to use the powers? None at all, so we haven't used it, and there's been no requests.
There's a high threshold in the instances that we would use it, and nothing's come to light that we require us to use RIPA.
We haven't used it for as long as I can remember. Okay, any further questions? Well, the proposer and seconder, we note the report. Proposer Councillor Bourne, seconded Councillor Park. All in favour? Any against? That's duly carried. Okay, item 7 is the Corporate Peer Challenge Action Plan. I've already referred to one of the outcomes from that has been actioned, and that's where we are progressing with looking for independent members for this committee. And I'll ask Mike Culver to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I have a short presentation, if that's okay, just to bring that up. So I'll just share my screen now. Excellent. Well, good evening, members. So my name is Mike Cllr. I'm the Corporate Strategy Manager at Eastleigh Borough Council. So I've just got this short presentation really to take us through the Corporate Peer Challenge. I've only got about 4 or 5 slides, so it'll be relatively short and sweet. I'm going to cover the focus for the review, which I think for many people will be reiterating because many were present in kind of the outcome recommendations which we received from the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge team. I touched on the LGA outcome report, which has of course been appended to the report, linking to the action plan. Again, the full details which you have before you in the report. So I won't go through the individual items, but just give you some high-level principles around some of those recommendations, and then talk just around some of the next steps really for our work. So the focus of the review, which again you'll be likely to be aware of, there were 5 kind of key areas which were a focus. These were local priorities and outcomes, organisational and place leadership, governance and culture, financial planning and management, and capacity for improvement. These are broadly the LGA's kind of core set of areas of focus for Corporate Peer Challenge reviews. However, we also asked as a council if they could also include our capacity and capability to deliver the One Horton Heath development in-house and the establishment of a housing revenue account. So against all of these key areas for review, the LGA formed their team. So we had a team of 5 Corporate Peer Challenge peers. They included a lead member, a peer member, and 4 officer peers. So the peer team spoke to more than 70 people across 35 meetings over 3 days from the 17th to the 19th of October. So it was a very kind of intense process. That was preceded with supplying the CPC team with a range of documentation and paperwork for them to kind of get a real grip of the council beforehand. On the last day of the review, we were presented with 12 recommendations. Again, it was in a briefing room upstairs. I think a number of members present here tonight were in the room at the time, and that was subsequently followed up with the LGA final report, which again is appended to the report pack that you have in front of you today. Overall, I think it was fair to say relatively positive, high-level narrative there, but then of course drilled down to the 12 recommendations. Which is really helpful. I'm just bringing up on screen here. I have clicked the link. Apologies if it doesn't work, but you obviously have the action plan within your packs, and it's available online by the link there. The broad principle for the 12 recommendations is across each of them, we've provided some narrative around the steps that we've already been undertaking as a council. We've provided some narrative around kind of our next steps, and we've given it a good indication in terms of the time frame which we expect to be achieving progress around that really. Just on, sorry. Okay, so in terms of next steps, and I guess actually this is the second part in the process thus far. I presented this presentation and report to PMT last week. Obviously, 8 tonight. We'll be proceeding to Cabinet next Monday on the 22nd. Following approval or discussion at Cabinet, we will post the report on our website, which will also go on the LGA's website, which is part of the process in terms of the LGA review. The LGA will then organise a check-in meeting with ourselves 6 to 12 months after the review, so we can kind of check up on progress, and alongside the external action plan, we obviously have an internal action plan which we're developing to help us with monitoring moving forwards. I would also say around the next steps, we're also concurrently developing a consolidated action plan and monitoring process, including some of the wider external reviews and recommendations which we have been receiving to date. For example, the DLUC Best Value Notice. So it can be considered through the lens of the wider set of recommendations moving forwards. So thank you very much. Hopefully that gives a good summary update of kind of our position today. Please, Jay, if you've got any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from the floor? No. Councillors, Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you. I know that the peer review included consideration of the financial plan. Was that the version that included nitrate credits, or was that the version which is currently being revised to change the treatment of nitrate credits and to use a bonus thing? The Ursula report we're going to be considering in item 8 was concerned that the nitrate credits are being treated as revenue income rather than capital income, aren't they? Was the version of the MTFP that was considered in this, presumably that was still treating the nitrate credit income as revenue income?
It was the revised version.
Revised version.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any other members? Am I right in thinking that all the recommendations that were put forward have been accepted and adopted? There are no,
Yes,
no resistance, in other words.
absolutely. It was the 12 that were presented and the 12 that we have carried forward. Yeah.
It was a learning process and the interviews were interesting, I have to say. Mine was. Okay, do I have any other members wishing to speak? In that case, we look for a proposer and seconder to note the report. It's also going to Cabinet next Monday. So Cllr Bourne, I'm Cllr Irish. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's duly carried. Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to item 8 and 9. 8 is the external audit value for money report from EY, and item 9 adds more meat to that from a council perspective. So it makes sense to actually put the two together so we can talk about both at the same time. But before that, I have a member of the public who wishes to speak and has asked a number of questions. Mr. Constable, if you'd like to come forward, have we got a microphone for him?
I'm happy to. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you hear on the screen, James?
Lovely.
The best way to work this, I'm going to allow you to ask all the questions. Normally we would have 3 minutes, but being as you could have done it in 2 parts, I'm open to you getting your questions out and answered. I will answer the questions. If you have any follow-ups, please let us know. We will send you a copy of the answers so that you can read through them at your leisure. And if you have any follow-ups, please feel free to contact us. And I'll also ensure that all members have a copy of the minute. And Janet has also asked for a copy if that may be possible. Thank you very much. Okay, first question then, Josh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Democratic Services team as well for we do this at this point rather than right at the start of the meeting and jumping into other topics in between. So I really appreciate that. So basically, just for context as to why I'm raising these questions, I'm sure all councillors present on this committee will be aware there is an incredible public interest in the One Morton Heath project and also the council's wider financial strategy, with residents raising large amounts of concern to every level of government in Eastleigh. With that in mind, after having reviewed these reports, which I think make for quite shocking reading, especially in their implications of the risk, substantial risk, with the continued approach by Eastleigh Borough Council in its approach to financing the One Morton project. In that spirit, I'm going to launch straight into a list of questions. If members need me to clarify anything, please let me know. So my first question is, what steps is the council taking to ensure that both the existing resources support One Morton Heath and the additional resources the council has accepted it will provide as part of the external audit's recommendations do not come at the expense of existing service delivery? Specifically, can councillors assure us but no cuts to staffing being considered to free up resources for the One Bourne project. Second question.
Can I
Do
ask?
you want to go one
I'm
by
going
one?
to answer each one, otherwise members will lose track of,
Yeah.
of where we are. So the answer to the first question, the council can give total reassurance that there will be no cuts to staff delivery, existing services to free up resources for the OHH project. The OHH project is requiring additional resource, and these are being recruited as required and funded from the project to ensure the impact on existing staff is kept to a minimum. The additional resources being recruited will in time be a benefit to existing resources and will supplement services with additional expertise and in the longer term additional funding for future rentals. Okay, question 2.
Question 2, with reference to the recommendation 3 of the external auditors report, do councillors find point 43 of the council's VFM response sufficient to address the public concern around the financing of the One Bourne project?
Okay, thank you. And the answer I've been given is, whilst acknowledging that the sentiment of the recommendation can apply to anything, this specific recommendation from the auditor does not relate to the OHH project. However, the council are more than happy with the external advice taken and are comfortable that any decision being taken is taken on the best available information and is very accurately reflected in both the statement of accounts and the medium-term financial plan.
Question number 3, will the council acknowledge that the extensive use of consultants of One Bourne has inflated the project's costs?
And the answer, the use of consultants has not inflated the cost of the project. The use of consultants is key for the delivery of the project of this size to ensure that the right expertise is provided at the right time. Where appropriate, the council will directly employees directly employ the
Directly employs.
Employees is a word missing. The relevant skills required, if that makes sense.
Question 4, has the council considered a scaling back of the One Bourne project, considering the rising costs? Specifically, has the council modelled potential measures to reduce the overall borrowing costs associated with the project by changing the housing delivery type? Has the council listed or modelled potential future measures to reduce the overall borrowing costs associated with the project by scaling it back? What total level of borrowing for One Bourne does the council deem acceptable? Will the council make any such existing financial modelling available to the public?
Thank you. As you would expect for any prudent business undertaking with this level of investment, a significant amount of financial modelling is undertaken to ensure the most appropriate decision can be made. This modelling includes, but is not limited to, assessing different delivery models and the housing types and mixes. In terms of acceptable level of borrowing, the guidelines for this are set out in the Prudential Code. Whilst this does not set out a definitive figure, it sets out the parameters for affordable, which the council must follow. And in the recent Cllr review, Cllr confirmed this code was being followed. It is important to understand that beyond the recent cabinet approval in December 2023, the council is not committed to borrowing any additional funds for any further phases of the project. Each future phase will be financially modelled as part of the planning process, and the appropriate delivery model will be recommended. This modelling will always be made public, and as in December 2023.
Finally, given the external auditor's report and the council's response to it, both of which acknowledge that material fraud may have taken place and cannot be ruled out, what additional steps will be taken by the council to identify fraud that has already taken place? What additional steps will be taken to prevent fraud on One Bourne Heath or any other council project? And has the council reached out to external bodies separate to the external auditor to investigate potential fraud?
Thank you. Bear with me. This is a long answer. It is important to note that there will always remain an inherent risk that fraud may not be detected, and it is essentially impossible for internal audit to prove that fraud has not occurred. The key for preventing fraud as far as possible is through prevention techniques, including policies, procedures, and controls. Internal audit will assess these policies, procedures, and controls and the compliance with them and provide an opinion. Internal audit, through its work, has not identified any instances of fraud to date. A fraud risk assessment will continue to be carried out, assessing the whole organisation and the internal audit plan counter fraud strategy, updated as necessary and presented to the Audit and Resources Committee. Internal audit, as an unbiased and objective function, will always be mindful of fraud risk throughout all audit work and will remain alert to red flags. As soon as a potential weakness in governance, risk and management or controls is identified by internal audit, it is brought to the attention of the responsible officer who can take action immediately. The implementation of the audit recommendations will continue to be monitored as part of the performance monitoring and escalated as necessary through the appropriate channels. A review of the policy and procedures for the fraud investigation has commenced, and it is planned that updates will be shared with Audit and Resources Committee in June 24. The Council is seeking an external review to specifically look at the Council's response to the whistleblower in view of the concern raised by the external auditor. Okay, I'll ensure that you get a copy of these questions and answers as I promised. There's just one word missing from my copy, which we'll try and fix for you. And indeed, all members will get a copy of that. I'll send one. We'll get one sent to Janice and Simon as well. I will now open it up for members. 2 members for questions. Do I have? Oh, yes. Questions on item 8 and 9. Come in. Is there anything you want to say up front? You can do.
Let me just give you a very brief introduction to the report, just to clarify the purpose of the report as we set out on your page 150. So on that page, we set out our responsibilities under the National Audit Office Code to assess the arrangements in place to achieve value for money at the council, and to consider whether there are any risks of significant weaknesses in those arrangements, and then to provide our conclusion against those risks of significant weakness. And I would point out that we're required to report that as soon as we feel that we have something that it should be brought to the attention of the members and those charged with governance, which is the Audit Committee. So the criteria across which we assess the organisation are around financial sustainability, the governance arrangements, and the arrangements in place to improve economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And you'll see on page 151 the 5 key risk areas that we identified during the course of our work, which has taken place from the latter half of 2022 and into 2023. So this report presents the work that we've done, the findings that we have in those areas of risks of significant weakness, and the recommendations that we've made. We have identified significant weaknesses in our view in the arrangements, and those are set out in the report that we are reporting as exceptions to your arrangements to achieve value for money. I think it's important to say that that is within our remit as the external auditors, as independent organisation from the organisation. You'll see that there are a number of places in the officers' responses where they either take a different view or believe that there is further work that is underway. We have not looked at the evidence to support their assertions. Ours is based on the evidence that we've seen to date, and that's why we're reporting these exceptions. So my recommendation to members is to ensure that you look at the commitments that the officers have made and that you satisfy yourselves that you have sufficient assurance over those actions that they are undertaking or have committed to undertake. Because as it stands at the moment, this is at a point in time based on the evidence that we've seen, and we aren't able to comment on those areas officers have committed to take further action as yet. So that would be my point.
Thank you, Janet. And it is worth saying that having the two together sort of adds meat to the bone, as it were. You quite clearly set out where you're coming from on this. And officers obviously have responded. And to be fair, we're all aware that we had 2 reviews last year, a peer review, which has been mentioned tonight, and the dealer review, which was done slightly earlier. And a lot of this crosses over, and to a great degree, a lot of the work is already in action. And I don't think we disagreed with any of the recommendations. As usual, we follow them up and will endeavour to put things right to satisfy your requirements. But we need to work together on that. And I will now open it to members if you have any questions on either part of those 2 reports. Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you.
Hang on a minute, Jim. I just wanted to ask if there are any questions from the public. Councillor. Sorry, I forgot your name. How bad is that? I'm sorry. You're not wearing it.
I can't believe people don't know my name.
Councillor Parker James,
Yes.
would you wear your badge in future so that I can see it?
Yeah. I've only really got 2 questions, which is, firstly, are members satisfied that when you took decisions last year without a business case or an updated model on 1 Horton Heath, that you took that decision with all the known facts, and was that an appropriate decision to take? That's my first question. My second question is, do you think it's appropriate for members of this council to find out about the allegations made against this council through a third party? That members were not informed that allegations had been made, and what steps this council might have to take to look into that? Do we think that's an appropriate way to have a transparent organisation? Do we think this is an effective use of governance? Because how can I, as a councillor, do my duty to hold people to account, to scrutinise when we don't know?
Thank you.
So they are my 2 questions.
Thank you, Lou. I will pass over to Sarah to answer those 2 questions.
Well, the first question was to members. I'm satisfied that we gave you all the information necessary to make a decision. The decisions taken came through this committee first for scrutiny and then went on to cabinet. So there were multiple opportunities, and we've always offered briefings to anybody who wants more clarity or understanding. So I'm comfortable on that.
And in that meeting, we were allocating funds. We weren't making extra borrowing. We were allocating funds that were already ring fenced for that project.
Yeah, it was more clarity on how the scheme was progressing, and talking about things like that in the December meeting.
And with regards
It's my response as a member of this committee, in response to Councillor Parker Jones's first question. As a member, I made it very clear in October that I really felt I did not have sufficient information. I also made it very clear that Cabinet wouldn't have sufficient information with the report that we passed on to them. I'd also like to point out that having Audit and Resources scheduled immediately before Cabinet means that no decisions have to be completely binary. It's like we checked all of this report, we checked all of this report. Having a few days between enables reports to be improved. And I feel really strongly that if this committee says, no, we don't feel there's sufficient information, but if you add a bit more here, a bit more there, then yes, that will be a lot better. That's the sort of decision we should be able to take, but we can't when we're scheduled back to back with Cabinet. I really do feel that it compromises the intention.
raised that at the time, and it was, the message was passed on allocation. But as far as whistleblowing is concerned, I believe that was that the second question? And how members aren't informed. Basically, it is confidential, and the investigations have to be carried out without any chance of it getting into public domain. And I believe that was done. But I think, Joe, would you have
so
comment on that?
as a council, we've got a duty to the whistleblower to protect them. So that's almost where we were with this investigation. As soon as that report has been received from EY, we've shared that. My understanding, Sarah's shared that wider with councillors to inform you. So I'm not sure, Lou, if you're expecting something further than the email from the CFO that explained it a few weeks back.
What email?
I think the point is that we followed the policy, and
Okay.
Councillor Holes was aware of the investigation as it went along. Didn't we refer to it in a previous report?
So in July 23, this committee was made aware of the whistleblowing that we were working with EY to progress that. So that was put into the public domain then.
Yeah.
And the chair has been kept fully informed of progress with that investigation and findings. I think what's important that I'd like councillors to note is, as and when weaknesses were identified, they were shared and action was immediately taken to mitigate the risk. Also, just to reiterate that all the audit testing that has been done by internal audit, there have been no instances of fraud have been found. As we've tried to explain, you can't categorically say fraud hasn't happened because of the way the testing works, but through that testing, no instances of fraud have been identified.
So I'm still a little confused. When were we informed?
In July, so that this committee was informed in July last year that we'd had a whistleblow.
Do you not think it's something that's important to the whole?
At that point, we were still undertaking the investigation, and as I said, we have to protect that whistleblower. So
I'm fully 100% behind whistleblowers. I think they perform a really important function, an absolutely incredibly important function. But I don't feel as a member that I was made aware of it. So I'll go back and have a look through audit and resources to see what was reported.
Yeah, please do. Okay, any further questions from the public gallery and open to members? Councillor Hadaway.
Just a clarification on this whistleblower policy that I've noticed that we're looking to update the whistleblower policy next month. But are we satisfied that ourselves, that our own internal whistleblower policy was followed at the time, albeit that there could be improvements that need to be made retrospectively? And my assumption is that our internal audit team would not be working in isolation anyway. Their work gets checked regularly and is recorded for future reference or use.
yeah, I can confirm that the whistleblower policy was followed. We notified the whistleblower informed of progress with the investigation, and so the review is going to make it more explicit about at what point EY are informed of any whistleblower. And I think it's important also to manage expectations of the whistleblower, because it's not always possible for us to fully share what's been found, and I think that's really important as well. So it's in there, but it's not as explicit. So I think it's important to manage his expectations. All right. In respect of the second part, internal audit work to public sector internal audit standards, and we'll carry out a self-assessment regularly to make sure they comply with those standards. And every 5 years will be subject to an external review. That was shared with this committee last year before. So yes, they are subject to reviews.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Pretty.
A couple really. Firstly, about the borrowing request that we had in December, I think it's important as Councillor Bourne made, it was releasing funds that were already approved. It wasn't further borrowing. And also, from my time with Procurement Executive Group before stepping down at Cabinet, I was always aware of a very strong and robust procurement procedure. Can officers confirm that One Horton Heath adhere to those procedures in the same way that other officers have to, or do they operate in a slightly different way, which would perhaps reflect the comments made by EY in their report? Because hopefully when I start back with Peg on as representing this committee, I'll be able to follow it up a little bit more. But it always struck me that we were very robust with the way we operated. We had a framework, we adhered to it. I can see where the concerns may come from One Horton Heath operating perhaps in a slightly different way. Could we have reassurances from the officers that that isn't the case? They do abide by our standards for other departments within the authority.
Yes, I can pick that up, Chair. So yes, absolutely. When the Horton Heath project was first considered, there was discussion about should we have a separate set of contract standing orders, and we were absolutely clear no. We are one council, we work to one set of rules. So yes, absolutely. And when you're back on the procurement executive group, you'll see lots of discussion, particularly at the moment with the big contracts that are going on. There's lots of subgroups and discussions to make sure that we're following the procurement procedures and that everybody understands the contracts that we're considering entering into before we sign on the dotted line.
Could I have a supplementary?
Yeah.
There was concerns raised about the purchase of the Chlr solar farm. And I know from my own experience in construction that different people put different valuations on the same project. How they ever achieve that, I have no idea. Are we comfortable that what we undertook in purchasing solar farm was subject to due diligence and careful market research?
Pick that one up, Chair. Yes, very comfortable as officers. I think, like you highlighted, the valuation of an asset at any fixed point in time will be very different depending on valuation method and the purchase. And we've had to show a different value in the accounts because of the nature of the rules within the accounts. We're very comfortable that the committee were aware of the long-term aim of the asset and the values associated with that. So we're very comfortable we had the right advice from relevant parties as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I know that we've got discussions on another project at the moment where two different consultants have come up with two different valuations. I think it is important that we, as councillors, bear in mind that we do take great care on making sure that we get value for money. And I was concerned at that sort of tremendous gap that EY and ourselves put up. But as long as we've done the due diligence, I don't think we could done any more. Thank you.
I think it's also worth clarifying that when we had the member presentations on the alternative heat sources, it was made quite clear at that time by yourself that it was the worst case scenario that you presented to us. Right.
Yes, there was a number of scenarios.
Yeah.
The one that went to cabinet was the one we considered as most appropriate as being an achievable likely case.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Simon.
So just to come back on the point about valuation, so you're entirely right. The value of an asset will be dependent on the basis of the valuation. So the discrepancy is the lower value, if you want, is the value of the asset as an operational solar farm. So that's an estimate of what you would pay for it as an operational solar farm. It's value in that use. The higher value is what you actually paid for it. So I think the point we're making is understanding the difference between the two values would give you a good idea, if you had that information, of whether you're prepared to pay that premium for the strategic benefits of the site that were articulated to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bourne.
Just going back to fraud and just getting some clarification, just because there was headlines from Eastleigh News today that gave the impression to anyone that just read the headline that, you know, fraud has been discovered, etc. But reading these reports and referring back to Mr. Constable's question, it looks as though no fraud has been discovered, but we can't rule out that no fraud has taken place. But the key thing is no fraud has been discovered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you also referred earlier to independent body coming in to just check over the,
Yep, we've appointed an external,
which was one of the recommendations, I believe,
the council's response
Yeah.
to the whistleblower, to make sure that.
to ensure that we've got it right and we learn from these things as we go along. Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you. I'll start off by thanking Sarah again for sending me information today that I couldn't find. My first question relates to page 16 of the Young report, linking to recommendation 2 about comprehensive, complete and balanced information should be presented to members for their making decisions. The revenue surplus that Cabinet based their decision on in 2021, we just did one with 1.1 million. I can find the reports. I can't find the 6.3 million deficit that Ernst & Young talk about in this report. Now, I'm not an accountant, so it could well be it's not there and I haven't found it. But it would be interesting to know how Ernst & Young derived their 6.3 million deficit as the worst case, or as their base case as part of that calculation, because I can't see that. So and certainly I think the point that Ernst & Young make that a range of numbers, a full suite of information should be available to members whenever they make decisions. That's something that I've gone on about it before, and I know it's something that many people around this table feel that we should be doing more of, and certainly the higher level of scrutiny that we've asked for the one here report and even into that. But I can't find that 6.3 million related to the solar farm. So is it just that Ernst & Young used a set of calculations which they haven't included in their report, and we don't know what it's based on? Or is it that it was in the Cabinet papers submitted in 2021 and I just can't find them?
Oh, you've lost it somewhere. I don't know the answer.
So, I mean, the point we are making is looking at the modelling that underpinned it. We think the 6.3 million deficit is the base case, worst case position. The 1.1 million is what was presented.
Yes.
That's the point that we are making.
So 6.3 million wasn't included in the Cabinet report. The 6.3 million potential deficit wasn't included in the Cabinet report.
No.
Thank you. My second question relates to page 17 on nitrates and the nitrate credit scheme. Obviously, really difficult launching a scheme. It's brand new. It's a pilot. It's not been done before. I appreciate that's difficult. Certainly, it was really interesting reading through the Ernst & Young report about the accounting treatment of the nitrate credits, that if they were to be spent during the year in which they're received directly on the capital, they would just go into the general reserves of the council. So I just really want clarification. Have I got that right? That the plan was that nitrate offset credits wouldn't necessarily be spent on offsetting nitrates, that they could potentially just end up in the general revenue fund for the council. Have I got that right? Have I got that wrong? So I'm not an accountant.
Not entirely. If I run back, so all of the nitrate, so the cost of the nitrate offsetting scheme is effectively the land and the appropriate mitigation we bought. All nitrate credits fund all of that cost. In the event that there was a profit, that would, this is where the discussion point was between us and the auditors, that would then either go in the general fund or be received as a capital receipt. But all of the cost of the mitigation to enable those credits will be funded by those nitrate credits.
Right, so there wasn't a plan then to treat this as a profit generating mechanism to support the council through selling nitrate credits. To be very
so subsequent, once we've covered the cost, subsequent profits we were proposing initially would be recognised in the general fund and would support services.
Were the potential customers for this scheme made aware of that?
Probably not directly, no, they were paying the approved policy cost of a credit, which generally was in line with national policy for other bodies.
Thank you. So a customer could be buying a nitrate offset credit, unaware that it might actually end up in the general fund for the council as opposed to being used to for nitrate.
No, they'd be very clear that the cost they were paying was covering their nitrate mitigation obligations, that they would be very clear it's specifically mentioned in their I don't know the agreement, but in the contract, it's specifically clear that it covers that cost.
Thank you for that clarification. The next thing I want to ask about is on page 22. On page 22 of the Ernst & Young report about the whistleblower incident. Ernst & Young seemed to be under the impression that the second set of allegations were dropped because the employee left the council. That's what I've read from it, and I could have got that completely wrong. But I just really want to be sure that, I mean, obviously, when people are visiting whistleblowing at the next day and out, it would be fantastic to do. It's certainly very, very timely to do it. But I just really want to be reassured that if a whistleblower leaves the council, decides to leave their employment, possibly even potentially due to concerns that they've raised through that whistleblowing process, that doesn't negate, it doesn't remove those allegations. They still get treated seriously.
No, absolutely. A whistleblower can come from anywhere. So absolutely, all the time the whistleblower is given, it remains live.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Any other questions? I mean, obviously, we have a very detailed report from EY, as we would have expected, highlighting and putting a lot of detail into your findings, a lot of which was previously covered, as it happens, by the 2 reviews we had last year. And as with those reviews, we've acknowledged all the recommendations, I believe. So we're going forward with that, which hopefully you'll be pleased to see. And also, members will have noted the officers' responses, because our officers have worked extremely hard. And while they might not always agree with the wording necessarily and the meaning behind the words, they do acknowledge that the recommendations have to be taken up and adopted. So that in mind, can I have a proposer that we note both reports, pick up on the questions and the answers that have been given, and that Cabinet are forwarded both for their consideration when they consider it? Will this go to Cabinet?
It wouldn't go to Cabinet, it just comes to this committee.
Okay, in that case, I think it would be
Just noting.
note both of them. So can I have a proposal and seconder? Proposed Councillor Bourne, Councillor Park to second. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. And obviously our staff, our officers will continue to work with yourselves, and thank you for that very detailed report, which I must have read about 4 times. Much appreciated. Okay, moving on to item 10, which is the verbal update from, there's only one, which is the Strategic Risk Management Group. The meeting was held yesterday. The group reviewed the corporate risk register and noted that with the support of the Safety and Resilience Manager, the council was looking at the impact of potential planned power cuts. Internal Audit carried out a review of risk management and a summary of the findings and progress with the implementation of the recommendations was provided by the Executive Head of Governance. The main area to address is training for staff, and Joe has already begun discussion with apparently we've got a different one. We'll start again. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. I didn't think I recognised it. Okay, this is the report. The review of the corporate risk register, a new risk was added in relation to the BV notice and the best value notice, and the corporate director provided an update. The corporate director presented the operational risk register, and this was discussed, and an update provided on lease reviews and the asset management database. It was confirmed that the new head of housing had commenced her role. An update was provided by the Health and Safety Officer, who confirmed that additional resources had been recruited to the team to provide maternity cover. An update on insurance renewals was provided by the Insurance Officer, who advised that the contract currently let under Hampshire Insurance Forum was due to be re-tendered during 2024-25. Discussion around the risk of cyber attacks and the contingency planning took place, and the Service Director for Governance and Support confirmed that this is a risk on the CRR and closely monitored by the CLB and the Data Security Board. Could you just indicate what those two bodies are? That's the CRR,
Corporate Risk Register,
Corporate Risk Register, and CLB,
Corporate Leadership Board.
the members and the public who are present. The Service Director for Governance and Support also provided an update on officer training and confirmed that she had attended 2 directorate meetings to provide a reminder of the Council's risk management framework, appetite for risk and arrangements for monitoring and escalating risk. Training for audit and committee members has been arranged for the 8th of February, and the invite would be extended to cabinet members. Can I just say that members who indicated that they couldn't make that date, I think it was maybe 1 or 2, you will have the benefit of individual attention and the opportunity to go through that meeting with officers after the day. And any papers will be provided for you to help you. The Service Director for Governance and Support also provided an update on officer training, confirmed that she had attended 2 directorate meetings to provide a reminder of the Council's risk management framework, appetite for risk and arrangements for monitoring and escalating risk. Training for audit and resources committee members, as I've said, would be arranged for the 8th of February. Next meeting is the 4th of March. Thank you. Save the day. For some reason, I had the last report up on my computer. Sorry about that confusion. Item 11 is the Cabinet Forward Plan. Are there any items on there that members feel that we ought to be looking at that we're not currently looking at? Comes up every meeting. No. Okay. I think there. And item 12 is the A&R work programme. Councillor Bourne.
So we've got statement of accounts and audit resource reports scheduled for today. Is that going to then be brought, go to the next one in February?
Unlikely. I would think it would be February. But
In terms of the 21-22 accounts, otherwise the VFM report says we're not in a position to give an opinion on the 21-22 accounts because we can't conclude there's no material fraud or non-compliance with law and regulation. So as things stand, no.
Got to have that review first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not tonight then, unlikely to be February, I would say.
Yeah. I mean,
Maybe February 25.
Councillor Tidridge.
Yeah, so the next meeting in 20th of February, I can't see whistleblowers specifically as an item on the working plan here. What's it come under?
I actually picked that up last week. Yeah.
We'll add it in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other questions, observations? Okay, thank you very much, members, and thank you for your contributions. The next meeting is the 20th of February, and we have the training on the 8th of February. Okay. Before we close the meeting.